Today's video is sponsored by Wild Grain. More on them coming up. Today, it's all about dinner for Dad. We're making my husband Nick's favorite food, starting with a manly meatloaf stuffed like a Philly cheesesteak. We'll pair it with one skillet melting potatoes that we could eat every night of the week, and a creamy Italian dressing that's perfect for a side salad. For dessert, we're speaking his love language with giant chocolate chunk cookies that go from freezer to table. It's all hearty and it's all easy. My husband Nick has been hard at work lately doing a DIY project in our kids' rooms. And so to thank him for his labor of love, today I'm doing dinner for the man of the house, and it's all about dinner for Dad. And so I'm making a few different things that are right up his alley. Anytime I'm cooking for my husband, it's definitely all about meat, potatoes, and a good dessert. Today I'm gonna start by making a Philly cheesesteak style meatloaf that is, I think, our family's new favorite. It's delicious because it has mushrooms and peppers and onions that have been cooked down, but then you stuff it inside a meatloaf and it just takes meatloaf to the next level. Meatloaf is something we already love, but then you add the flavor of a Philly cheesesteak, and if you have leftovers, making a Philly cheesesteak leftover meatloaf sandwich is delicious. So to start up my meatloaf, I'm chopping a few mushrooms up. I'm just slicing them thinly. These are just regular baby bella mushrooms. And then I've got half of a green bell pepper I'm also gonna chop up. So I'm gonna slice it first and then I'll give it a dice. This is one of those recipes that I love because the whole family enjoys it, but it's kind of something different than just your typical meatloaf. So it's kind of a spin on something that we love to eat anyway. And I love it because you can either do regular provolone cheese and make it nice and melty, or if you like a little bit of a kick, you could use pepper jack cheese, and that would be amazing in this. So I have all of my mushrooms and my bell pepper diced up now. That's ready to go in a skillet, which I'm gonna go ahead and preheat over medium-high heat. I'll grab an onion, and I'm just gonna use half of a sweet onion. I'm gonna chop that in half, and then I'm actually gonna just thinly slice it, but I'm gonna cut it this way first so that my slices are smaller. That'll fit better inside the meatloaf. So now I have my skillet preheating over medium-high heat, and I'm gonna add all of my mushrooms and my onions and the green bell pepper. And I'm just gonna let those cook for a couple minutes and kind of soften, get a little bit brown and caramelized, and then we're gonna let it cool and work on our meatloaf filling. We're gonna make some homemade easy sourdough breadcrumbs. So you can just take some sourdough bread from the store or that you've made, and I'm gonna put them straight into the food processor, and they're gonna add a really good flavor to it. So I'm just taking this fresh bread and I'm just gonna crumble it straight in here and let the food processor do the work. And just that quickly, we have really easy homemade fresh breadcrumbs. So I'm gonna start my meatloaf mix in this bowl. I'm gonna do about 3/4 of a cup of breadcrumbs. You wanna get just the right amount because you want it to be plenty beefy, but then you also wanna have some of those breadcrumbs to kind of absorb all the flavors and the fat and get just the right texture. So I'm gonna do about 3/4 of a cup. And I actually like to grind up a few too many because then I can just pop them in a Ziploc bag and put them in the freezer. And then next time I need some homemade breadcrumbs just to throw in anything from meatballs to a breadcrumb topping, then I already have them in my freezer ready to go. So I'll put these in the freezer and save those for later. Now in the bowl, I'm gonna add in an egg and some milk. So let me grab those. To help bind everything together, I'm gonna add in 1 egg. I'll measure out half a cup of whole milk. And that'll help to hydrate those breadcrumbs. And then to add a little more beefy flavor, we're gonna add in a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Now to season up the breadcrumbs, I'm gonna add a little bit of garlic powder. We're gonna do about 1 teaspoon. And then we wanna add in plenty of salt for the beef and the breadcrumbs. So I'm adding in about 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and I'll do about 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. I'll go ahead and stir this together so everything's combined before I add in my meat so I don't have to overwork the meat. So I've added in 1 pound of ground beef, and I'm actually using a ground sirloin today. You want to make sure that you're using a lean ground beef whenever you're making meatloaf. That way when all the fat starts to render, you're not kind of left with a meatloaf mess. So I've put in 90% lean ground sirloin, but you can use ground beef, same thing. And I just like to break it up a little bit first, and then I'm gonna add in all of those cooled veggies that we we cooked earlier. So our onions, our green bell pepper, and all those mushrooms, and they've cooled, so it's not gonna cook the ground beef or the egg. So I'll just add all of those in. And you can smell it already. It's already starting to smell like a Philly cheesesteak. So yummy. So now we have our meatloaf base, and I'm just gonna mix this all together until it's nicely combined, and then I'll show you how to layer it. Now to turn this meatloaf mixture into my Philly cheesesteak, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by making a base layer of our meatloaf filling, and then we're gonna stuff it with a little bit of cheese. Now today I'm gonna be using a few provolone cheese slices for that nice melty classic Philly cheesesteak feel, but if you like a little bit of a kick, then use pepper jack. That's gonna be amazing in this. In the bottom of my little loaf pan here, I'm gonna put about half of the meatloaf mixture, and then I'll just spread it out along the bottom. I like to press it down with my spatula, but then do a little bit up the sides, almost like a pie crust, because that's what's gonna help hold our cheese in. That way it's not melting out everywhere and really stays contained within the meatloaf. So just make kind of like a little bed inside, go up the edges. Now I'm gonna grab my cheese slices, and depending on the size of your cheese, you could either fold it in half or just leave it whole. That way it's not going outside of the meatloaf and it's staying within those borders that we made. I'll place them right inside and make a little layer here of the sliced cheese, and you can just rip one in half. It doesn't matter as long as it's all stuffed in there, and you see how the edges are going to kind of be around it. Then we'll layer in the rest of our meatloaf mixture and make sure all those edges are nice and sealed up so it doesn't start oozing out. Just push that all the way down to the edges and kind of press it down, that way it seals together. You don't want any of that good cheese to escape. It's going to be so yummy. My meatloaf is put together and assembled, and we're going to end up topping it with even more of that cheese and kind of getting it bubbly and golden at the end. But right now I'm actually going to make a little bit of a sauce to go on top, because you can't have meatloaf without like a ketchup-y sauce, and it's kind of unique because I'm going to use a little bit of beef bone broth, and that gives it even more of a beefy flavor. And then to that, I'm gonna add a no sugar ketchup, and I'm gonna add about a 1/4 cup of that right in the same jar, so it makes it really easy to put the sauce together. And then for a little mustardy kick, I like to use honey mustard, but you could also just use a regular plain mustard. And we're gonna use just about a teaspoon of that. And if you're using a ketchup that's already sweetened, you can omit this or add it, but I'm gonna add in about 2 tablespoons of coconut sugar. If you don't have coconut sugar, just use brown sugar. There we go. This is super simple and quick, but it's gonna give this meatloaf an amazing flavor. So I'm just gonna mix this together, get everything combined. And it looks thin now, but don't worry, as it bakes, it's gonna thicken up and be the perfect consistency. So now I'm gonna take my meatloaf and I'm just gonna pour this delicious sauce all over the top. That's it for this meatloaf for now, and I'm gonna pop this in my oven at 350 degrees for about 1 hour, and then I'll show you how I finish it off with even more cheese. Now to go with this heartier, meaty dinner tonight, I'm just gonna make a really easy green salad to go on the side, but I'm gonna make it a little bit special by doing a homemade dressing, and I'm gonna make a creamy Italian one. So this is gonna be really easy. Let me show you how to make it. This salad dressing is so good to keep on hand in the fridge, and it starts out with 1/3 cup of raw apple cider vinegar with the mother, the real stuff, and then I put 1/4 cup of avocado oil mayo. You can use regular mayo too. 2 tablespoons of honey mustard or Dijon mustard. I always like to have options, so you can switch out any of these ingredients to suit what you already have in your fridge. Then I add in a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of cracked black pepper. Then I grate in 1/2 cup of freshly grated real Parmesan cheese. And I'll whisk that all together until it's nice and creamy. And then to emulsify it, I'll drizzle in about 1/2 cup of extra virgin olive oil. And you could also do this in the blender or food processor. So that's it for this really easy, creamy Italian vinaigrette. So I'm just gonna put it in the fridge and let all the flavors mesh, chill it, so it's ready to go for our salad. Before I get started on the melting skillet potatoes that is gonna be the perfect pair for this meatloaf tonight, I'm gonna go ahead and bake off our dessert, which are gonna be these amazing giant chocolate chunk cookies, which is why I'm so excited to share with you today's video sponsor, which is Wild Grain. Wild Grain is the first ever bake from frozen subscription box for sourdough breads, artisanal pastries, and fresh pastas. They partner with small bakeries and pasta makers around the country to help keep the tradition of real handmade artisanal products alive. So you can get that same amazing sourdough bread without all of the difficult work and trial and error that it can be to make your own. Not to mention, it can be really time consuming, and not all of us always have the time to keep on our sourdough starters, and they go from frozen to table in 25 minutes or less. So it's super convenient to just keep on hand in the freezer. I love that you can build your own box so you can get exactly what you want, whether it's sourdough bread, ciabatta bread, croissants, fresh pastas. There's so many options, and they switch them out seasonally so that you have new things to choose from all the time. And they even have a new box that is 100% plant-based. So if that's something important to you, you can check that one out as well. I also really love it when companies give back. So for every membership, they donate 4 meals to the Greater Boston Food Bank. They've given me a really fun offer for you. You're gonna get $30 off your first box plus free croissants for life. So if that's something that you're interested in trying out, you can go to my link down below or visit wildgrain.com/healthyelizabeth30. Use my code healthyelizabeth30 to get that deal. Be sure to check them out. I'll have everything down in the description box. And thanks again to Wild Grain for sponsoring today's video. These giant chocolate chunk cookies just came out of the oven and they're cooling, and now I'm gonna make the other 3. So I just pulled out these cookies straight from the freezer, and I'm just gonna take the huge chunk of dough here and just put it on my baking sheet. I have it already lined with my unbleached parchment paper, just like always. And now I'll just put this in my preheated oven at 350 for 16 to 20 minutes, and it's as simple as that, and they smell amazing. Okay, I just snuck a bite because I had to taste test cookies. They're really good. You wanna try it? While my cookies finish baking, I'm gonna get started on these skillet potatoes that are melty and buttery, and they just kind of fall apart. So I'm just using some russet potatoes, and depending on the size, if they're really big, you wanna use 3 large ones, but I'm gonna use 4 smaller ones today. And I'm just gonna start by peeling them. You wanna get the skin off, that way all of our mixture that we're gonna pour onto it, like chicken broth and butter and oil, is all gonna be able to seep into those potatoes and get them nice and soft and melting. I've peeled all my potatoes. Now any brown spots that they have, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut off with a knife. Now I'm gonna cut the potato into 1-inch slices, but I'm gonna start by taking just a little bit off the ends to kind of remove the roundness. That way when I lay them in the skillet, they'll brown evenly. So just take a little slice off the ends. Once all my potatoes have been sliced, I had my cast iron skillet heating over medium heat, and I'll add in half a stick of butter and then just a couple tablespoons of olive oil, and I'll swirl that together, and that's what we're gonna use to pan fry these potatoes. And these potatoes will start in the skillet in one pan, so make sure it's oven safe, and then we're gonna put it into the oven to finish them off. Before I put these in a hot skillet, I have them all lined up here, and I'm gonna pat them dry with a paper towel. That way we can get a really nice brown, crispy coating on it before they go into the oven and start to really get soft, because we want to make sure that they develop really good flavor. So I'm going to pat them dry with a paper towel, and now I'll just season the top side here with a little bit of salt and pepper, and then we'll put them top side down in the skillet so we can season the other side. Next, I'll place the potatoes in that hot oil and butter, and I'll sear them 4 to 5 minutes on either side until there's a nice brown coating. And then once I turn it over and flip it to the other side, I'm gonna take a couple cloves of garlic and I'll add those in too. And the reason I like to do it this way is because that way, if you add minced chunks of garlic in there, then those little bits of minced garlic are gonna get burnt. But if you add whole cloves and just pop them in whole, it infuses the butter and the olive oil with all of that garlicky flavor that you want, but without the little burnt bits that you would get with just normal minced garlic. Once my second batch of giant chocolate chunk cookies, which are delicious by the way, were out of the oven, I set them on a cooling rack to cool and set up for about 5 minutes. That way dessert was done, and now I can use my oven again, so that way I can put the potatoes in there and get those cooking. So once you start to see that beautiful golden crust developing on the other side of the potatoes, that's when I go in and I'll add in a splash or two of chicken broth or chicken bone broth. Just pour it right over the top, you don't need to stir it, and then I'll put that in an oven preheated to 375 for 30 minutes until they're soft and falling apart. And that was the perfect timing because then I could take my meatloaf out of my other oven and I'm gonna put it in my small oven now to broil the cheese on top. So I'll just take it out of the oven, top it with a few slices of provolone, then into the broiler for about 5 minutes or so, just until the top is bubbling and golden brown. The potatoes are amazing as is, but to spruce them up and make them even more flavorful, once they come out of the oven, I do a little squeeze of lemon juice over the top and a sprinkle of either dried or fresh parsley and chives. Just really enhances the flavor and makes a beautiful presentation. Now I'm just finishing off this dinner and I'm going to show you how I wrap it all up and get this dinner ready to eat. I just took a handful of lettuce. I love lettuce that has the little bits of red lettuce in it because it actually has more iron than spinach. So if you're looking to get more iron in your diet, maybe you're anemic, that's a great way to do it. And then I just left it plain, a simple green salad with that creamy Italian dressing that I just drizzle right over the top. Not too much. I just kind of toss it lightly and then we can always add extra. And then I put all of those beautiful chocolate chunk cookies, at least the ones that were left, on a serving platter so that we could have that in the center of the table once dinner was eaten and we were ready to go. So now I'll show you how to plate it up. I like to start with a few potatoes and I'll drizzle some of that delicious pan sauce right over the top. Then I'll get a big plateful of salad. I like to fill half of my plate with greens if I can, and then I'll get a nice slice that's thick of that delicious Philly cheesesteak meatloaf. And here is my dinner for the husband. He loved this dinner. This is right up his alley, and it's right up our alleys too. The whole family loves this. You can't go wrong with meat, potatoes, good salad, and of course, delicious cookies. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you're looking for any of the recipes, you can always check the description box or head over to healthyelizabeth.com. I have most of my recipes over there. Thanks again to Wild Grain for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you check out my link in the description box and let me know if you guys try them out. Thanks so much for joining me today in the kitchen.